My name is Irene Valdez, 28 years old. If you were to ask anyone who really knows me, they'd tell you one thing. I've always believed in loyalty above everything else. Not the flashy kind of love you see on social media, not the whirlwind romances that burn hot and then collapse into ashes, but the steady kind. The kind where if I'm with someone, I'm all in. No games, no backups, no keeping one foot out the door, just commitment. And when I first met Samuel Sam, as everyone called him, I thought I'd finally found someone who valued that too. Sam had this boyish smile, the kind that made you want to believe he meant every word he said. He could be charming when he wanted to be funny in that easygoing way that drew people to him. At first, being with him felt effortless, like slipping into a life I'd always wanted but didn't think I'd ever have. I wasn't the type of woman who turned heads when I walked into a room. I wasn't flashy or wild, but Sam used to tell me he loved that about me, that I was dependable, thoughtful, the kind of person who showed up. And so I did. I showed up. Every single time. When he was short on rent, I covered it without a second thought. When he wanted to take a certification course to boost his career, I worked extra shifts and helped pay his tuition. I skipped vacations, postponed buying new clothes, and made sacrifices. I didn't even stop to tally because I believed in him, in us. My friends teased me about it sometimes. Irene, you're spoiling him, they'd laugh. Or, careful. You're setting the bar so high, he'll just expect it forever. But I didn't care. To me, love wasn't about keeping score. It was about building a life together, brick by brick, even if it meant carrying more weight sometimes. For a while, I really thought we had it all. Our weekends were filled with little rituals that felt like forever cooking together in our tiny kitchen, binge-watching shows under a pile of blankets, spontaneous road trips where we'd get lost and end up laughing about it. I'd wake up with his arm draped over me, his breath warm against my neck, and I'd think, yes, this is what home feels like. But love has a cruel way of disguising cracks as quirks. And little by little, those quirks started cutting deeper. It began subtly. If I surprised him with takeout from his favorite spot, he'd casually say, "Oh, Diana used to love bringing me here." Diana, his ex. At first, I laughed it off. Everyone has a past, right? It didn't mean anything. But then it was at a party. I was my usual reserved self, sipping on a drink, content to stay on the sidelines. Sam chuckled and said, "You're so different from Diana. She could light up any room." That one stung. I told myself not to make a big deal of it. He didn't mean it like that. Or maybe I was just being insecure. After all, he was with me, not her. That had to count for something, right? But the comments didn't stop. They multiplied. Soon it wasn't just the comments. His messages grew shorter. The man who once flooded my phone with updates about his day or silly memes suddenly replied with one-word answers. Yeah. Fine. LOL. Weekends together became rare. When I asked if he wanted to do something, he'd shrug and say he was tired. But then I'd see pictures on social media of him out at a bar with friends the same night. It was like watching him slip through my fingers slow enough that I kept thinking I could catch him if I just tried harder. And God, did I try. I planned date nights, bought him little gifts, even tried to spice things up in ways I never had before. I thought if I just showed him enough love, he'd remember why he chose me in the first place. But his eyes were somewhere else. I'd catch him smiling at his phone, his thumb flying across the screen, and when I asked who it was, he'd roll his eyes. "Relax, Irene. It's just a friend." Just a friend. The way he said it made my stomach twist. I wanted to believe him desperately. I wanted the man I fell in love with to still be there, buried under stress, bad habits, or maybe just a rough patch. I told myself not to jump to conclusions. That's who I was, the steady one, the fixer, the woman who didn't give up easily. But deep down, something gnawed at me, a whisper in my chest that said, he's already gone. I'd lie awake some nights, listening to him breathe beside me, scrolling through his phone in the dark when I thought I was asleep. I'd wonder if he was texting Diana again, wonder if she'd ever really left our relationship at all, or if she'd been sitting between us this whole time, invisible but suffocating. And yet, I stayed, because that's who I was. The woman who stayed, who believed in repairing what was broken, who thought love was supposed to hurt sometimes. But with every ignored message, every comparison to a woman I'd never met but already hated, every night he chose the world over me. My heart started to fracture, and I couldn't help but wonder if loyalty meant giving everything. What did it mean when the person you loved stopped giving anything back? I'd never dared to ask that question before, but I was about to. And the answer would tear apart everything I thought I knew about him and about myself. At first, I kept telling myself things would go back to normal. Relationships go through phases, right? Maybe Sam was stressed, maybe work was draining him, but weeks turned into months, and instead of pulling closer, he drifted further. The signs were impossible to ignore. He stopped reaching for my hand when we walked together. Nights that used to end with whispered jokes and tangled limbs in bed were replaced by him scrolling through his phone, his face lit by a glow I wasn't invited into. And when I asked if something was wrong, he didn't look sad. He looked annoyed. "Nothing's wrong, Irene. You're overthinking again." His sigh said more than his words. Like my concern was just another burden. I told myself not to take it personally, but how could I not? The man who used to flood my phone with silly memes and miss you texts now took hours to respond. When he did, it was one word at best. Yeah, fine, cool. I started memorizing the pattern of his coldness when he got it in his head to go out with friends 2-3 nights in a row. When he'd come home late, the faint scent of perfume clinging to him, not mine. Must have been someone I hugged goodbye. He shrugged, kicking off his shoes like nothing was wrong. "You're paranoid." Paranoid. That word cut deeper than he realized, because paranoia implied the problem was all in my head. But deep down, I knew I wasn't imagining the distance. The comparisons, too, never stopped. If anything, they grew sharper. One evening, I picked out a bottle of wine for dinner. I thought I was doing something thoughtful, something that might spark a bit of the old warmth between us. Sam poured himself a glass, took a sip, and muttered, "Diana always had such a knack for picking the perfect wine." The words weren't even meant to be cruel. He said them casually, absently, like he was just sharing a fact. But that made it worse. It meant she was always there on his mind, even when I was standing right in front of him. Another time he was brooding after a rough day pacing our living room. I tried to calm him, reassure him, tell him things would work out. He waved me off with a sharp laugh. Diana always knew how to cheer me up. You just don't get it." I froze. My heart sank so low I thought it might never come back up again. I was living in the shadow of a ghost. A woman who wasn't here, who wasn't even supposed to matter anymore, was suddenly everywhere in our kitchen, in our conversations, in the silence between us. I couldn't compete with her, not really. How do you fight someone's memories? But instead of walking away, I clung tighter. I thought maybe I could remind him of who I was, who we were. So I tried harder. I planned little surprises, leaving notes in his bag, making his favorite meals, even dressing differently when we went out, hoping to catch his eye the way Diana once did. Each attempt was met with indifference. "That's nice," he'd mumble, not even looking up from his phone. Or worse, with suspicion. "Why are you trying so hard all of a sudden? It feels fake." The more I gave, the more he pulled away. Even intimacy, the one thing that had once been so natural between us, felt like begging for scraps. When I reached for him at night, he'd turn his back. If I kissed him, he'd sigh. "Not everything's about sex, Irene." His voice sharp, dismissive. But then he'd go out again 2 nights in a row, stumbling back home with cologne clinging to him that I didn't recognize. I didn't need proof. My gut already knew the truth. Still, I told myself it was a phase, that if I just held on a little longer, he'd come back to me. Because that's who I was, the woman who held on even when every sign screamed, "Let go." But the more I reached out, the more he recoiled. One night I asked him directly, "Sam, are you seeing someone else?" He laughed. "God, Irene, you're so insecure. Not everything's about Diana. You're imagining things." But the way he said her name, so easily, so naturally, it confirmed what I didn't want to face. Diana had never left, not from his mind, not from his heart. That night, lying awake next to him, I realized something chilling. I wasn't just losing him. I'd already lost him, and all I had left was a hollow version of a man who didn't even want to be here anymore. Still, I stayed. Because I wanted to believe love could outlast betrayal, that loyalty meant something, that all my sacrifices hadn't been for nothing. But deep down I knew. The cracks were no longer cracks. They were canyons. And no matter how hard I tried to build a bridge, Sam had already burned it from his side. And soon he was going to burn me too. It happened on a Tuesday night. I'd come home from work exhausted, the kind of exhaustion that clings to your bones. But instead of collapsing into bed, I stopped by the store. I picked up the ingredients for Sam's favorite pasta, the one I'd made for him on our first anniversary. I thought maybe, just maybe, a quiet dinner might melt some of the ice between us. The apartment smelled of garlic and simmering tomatoes when he walked in. I looked up from the stove, hopeful. "Hey," I said softly. "I made dinner. Thought we could eat together tonight." He didn't even glance at the table I'd set or the food on the stove. He tossed his bag onto the counter with a heavy thud. "I'm not hungry." That was it. No thank you. No recognition that I'd just spent an hour cooking after a 12-hour shift. Just cold dismissal. Something inside me snapped, not in anger, but in clarity. "Sam, we need to talk." He groaned, already annoyed. "About what now?" "About us." I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "About how you've been so distant. About how I feel like I don't matter to you anymore." He rolled his eyes, leaning back against the counter like I was boring him to death. "God, you're so dramatic. Not everything has to be a big deal." "It is a big deal," I pushed. "You never want to spend time with me. You barely text me back. And every time I try to do something nice for you, it's like it doesn't even register. I'm not asking for much. I just want to feel like I'm still your girlfriend, not some roommate who pays the bills." His arms folded across his chest. His jaw tightened. "You always need so much reassurance. It's exhausting." "I need reassurance because you act like you don't care." My voice cracked, despite me trying to stay calm. "Half the time you're comparing me to Diana like I'll never be good enough. Do you realize how it feels to constantly be measured against her?" And then it happened. The words that would carve themselves into my memory forever. He smirked, tilted his head, and with a voice cold enough to freeze me in place, he said, "Maybe if you could actually measure up to Diana in bed, I wouldn't have to think about her so much." Silence. The kind of silence where the world stops breathing. My ears rang, my chest constricted, my hands went numb at my sides. What did you just say?" I whispered. He shrugged like he hadn't just set fire to everything between us. "Don't act shocked. You've always known you're not exactly satisfying. Diana knew what she was doing. You don't. That's just the truth." The smug curl of his lips, that tiny cruel smirk, was worse than the words. He wasn't just insulting me, he was proud of it. My first instinct was to fight back, to scream, to throw something, to demand how he could cut me so deep after everything I'd given him. My mind raced with every sacrifice I'd made, every bill I'd paid, every hour I'd worked, so he could chase his dreams. But instead, something in me went cold. The kind of cold that comes when you finally see the truth ugly, undeniable, merciless. I stared at him for a long moment. Then I nodded slowly. "I see." He blinked, surprised by my calmness. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means we're done." I turned off the stove, grabbed my jacket from the back of a chair, and headed for the door. His voice followed me, sharp and mocking. "Wait, seriously. You're going to walk out because of one comment." I stopped with my hand on the doorknob. "No," I said quietly. "I'm walking out because of everything. That comment just showed me who you really are." His jaw dropped slightly as though he hadn't expected me to actually leave. "You're being ridiculous." But I didn't answer. I opened the door, stepped outside, and closed it behind me. No yelling, no begging, no fight, just silence. And in that silence, I realized something. He had finally made it easy for me. That night, I didn't sleep much. Not because I regretted leaving, but because the words kept replaying in my head. "You'll never measure up to her in bed." The kind of insult designed to wound a woman where she feels most vulnerable. But instead of bleeding, I felt numb, like he'd ripped away the last illusion I'd been clinging to. And the truth was, I didn't lose him that night. I'd already lost him long ago. That night, I just lost the illusion that he was worth holding on to. The morning after I left, my phone lit up with messages. "Sam, Irene. Can we talk, Sam? I didn't mean what I said last night. I was just mad. Sam, please let's not throw away everything over one fight." I stared at the screen, my chest tight. For a split second, the old Irene, the one who never gave up, wanted to answer, to hear him out, to believe he was sorry. But another part of me, the part that remembered the smirk on his face as he cut me down, knew better. Still against my better judgment, I agreed to meet him later that day. Not because I wanted him back, but because I needed closure. When I walked into his apartment, he was sitting on the couch, arms folded, like a sulking teenager. Before I could even sit down, he started, "Look, I shouldn't have said what I said. It was low, okay, but you have to admit you were pushing me. You always want to talk about feelings and problems, and sometimes I just snap. It doesn't mean I don't care about you." I stayed standing, my bag still slung over my shoulder. "That wasn't just snapping, Sam. You meant it. You've been comparing me to Diana for months. Don't pretend last night was some isolated slip." He huffed, rolling his eyes. "Why are you so sensitive? Everyone says things they don't mean in fights." I tilted my head. "So you don't think telling your girlfriend she'll never measure up to your ex is crossing a line?" His voice rose sharp and defensive. "You're so dramatic. You're really going to end things over one stupid comment." I let him rant, and then he said the words that stripped away whatever tiny thread of hope I'd been holding. "Diana always had more passion, more everything. But she couldn't commit. That's why I chose you. Because you're stable. Safe. And now you're throwing that away because your ego's bruised. I froze. Chose me because I was safe. Not because I was loved. Not because I was wanted. Because I was convenient. And in that moment, I realized I was never his first choice. I was his backup plan. Listen to yourself, I said quietly. You just admitted you settled for me. That's not love, Sam. That's convenience. And I refuse to be anyone's safety net. His eyes narrowed. So what? You think you're too good for me now? I shook my head. No, I just finally realized you're not good for me. And with that, I walked out. For the last time. I went no contact after that. No texts. No calls. No stalking his social media. I erased him from my life. It wasn't easy. There were nights I lay awake fighting the urge to demand an apology he'd never give. There were moments I caught myself scrolling through old pictures, wondering if I'd thrown away something worth saving. But every time the doubt crept in, I reminded myself of his words. You'll never measure up. I chose you because you're safe. Love should never feel like being someone's consolation prize. So instead of reaching for him, I reached for myself. I threw myself into work, staying late, taking on new projects. I went back to the gym, not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted to feel strong again. I reconnected with friends I'd neglected while orbiting around Sam's moods and whims. And for the first time in years, my life felt like mine. Meanwhile, Sam moved on fast. Or at least he pretended to. A few weeks after I left, mutual friends started whispering that he'd gotten back together with Diana, the woman he'd been comparing me to all along. At first, he flaunted it. Their Instagram posts were everywhere. Dinners, parties, selfies, captioned with lines like "finally happy again" and "real passion never dies." It stung. Of course it did. Seeing him smiling with her, acting like I'd never existed, acting like I was the mistake. But then I'd remember the way he'd looked me in the eye and told me I'd never measure up. And the jealousy that threatened to consume me faded. Because why would I compete for someone who had already shown me I wasn't enough for him? Still, I kept tabs without meaning to. The posts slowed down. The smiles faded. Eventually, the pictures disappeared altogether. A mutual friend filled me in. Apparently, Sam had forgotten why he broke up with Diana in the first place. She was the same woman she'd always been: unfaithful, impulsive, restless. Within 2 months, she'd cheated on him. Just like that, Sam was back where he started, only this time with no loyal girlfriend waiting in the wings to pick up the pieces. I didn't need to gloat. I didn't need to send a "told you so." Karma was doing the work for me, and for the first time in a long time, I felt free. It didn't take long for the news to spread. Diana had cheated on Sam. Apparently, it wasn't even subtle. Mutual friends said she was spotted out with someone else, laughing, holding hands, while Sam sat at home waiting for her. The perfect passion he'd flaunted on social media crumbled in less than 2 months. And just like that, the man who told me I'd never measure up was the one left in pieces. His Instagram, once filled with grinning photos, went dark. The captions about "finally happy again" stopped. Diana vanished from his feed like she'd never existed. And then my phone buzzed. At first, it was small. "Sam, hey. How are you?" "Sam, been thinking about you." "Sam, I made a mistake. Can we talk?" I ignored them. Days later, another message lit up my screen. "Sam, Diana wasn't what I thought. She used me. She broke me. You were always the steady one. I should have appreciated you." I stared at it, feeling nothing. Not anger, not longing, just clarity. The man who once mocked me for being too sensitive was now the one desperate for comfort, and I didn't have any left to give. The messages grew bolder, longer. "Irene, I know you probably hate me, but please don't shut me out. We were good together, weren't we? I can change. Please, let's start over." Then came the late-night calls, voicemails full of tears, his voice broken. I messed everything up. I thought I wanted excitement, but what I needed was someone steady, someone who cared. That was you, Irene. Please, please don't give up on us. I didn't answer. For once in my life, I chose silence. It all came to a head one Saturday afternoon at the gym. I was wiping sweat from my forehead when I saw him standing near the entrance, like a ghost from my past. "Irene," he said, breathless, as though he'd rehearsed the moment 100 times. "Please, just hear me out." I crossed my arms steady. "You've been texting me for weeks. I think I've heard enough." His eyes were red, his hair messy. He looked smaller somehow, stripped of the arrogance he used to wear, like armor. "I made a mistake," he said quickly, voice cracking. "Diana wasn't what I thought. She used me. She broke me down. You never did that. You were always good to me. Please, Irene, I can change. I'll be better. Just give me one more chance." I shook my head slowly. "You didn't just make a mistake, Sam. You looked me in the eye and told me I'd never measure up. You don't take something like that back." He stepped closer, desperation flickering into his eyes. "I was angry. I didn't mean it. I swear. You're better than her in every way. Please don't walk away from us." I gently pulled my arm free when he reached for me. "You already walked away the moment you compared me to her. There's no coming back from that." His face twisted. Desperation flipped into bitterness. "So what? You're just going to throw away years together, just like that?" I met his glare calm as ice. "No, Sam. You threw it away. I'm just finally walking away from the trash." The words hit him like a slap. He flinched, his lips parting, but no words came out. For the first time, he was silent. He turned, storming out of the gym with tears in his eyes. And just like that, he was gone. The weeks after that were the quietest of my life, and I mean that in the best way. No angry texts, no late-night voicemails, no more drama. Sam finally stopped trying, and I never looked back. I kept growing. My boss noticed my dedication at work and offered me a promotion. My body grew stronger, healthier. Friends started introducing me to new people, not in a romantic sense, just reconnecting me to the world I'd ignored for too long. One night I scrolled through old photos, dozens of them with Sam, road trips, dinners, birthdays, and instead of feeling sadness, I felt free, detached, like I was looking at someone else's life, someone else's mistakes. People sometimes ask me if I'd ever take him back if he showed up again, promising he'd changed. My answer is always the same no. Because once someone tells you to your face you'll never measure up, that seed never really goes away. And I refuse to spend my life proving my worth to someone who should have seen it all along. Sam got what he wanted, his passion, his excitement. And he got the crash that came with it. Me, I got peace. And honestly, that's the best revenge of all. The strangest thing about heartbreak is how quiet life becomes once the noise is gone. No more arguments that spiral into shouting matches. No more cold silences stretched across the dinner table. No more waiting up at night hoping his key turns the lock before dawn. At first, that quiet felt foreign. Like I was missing something, even if that something had been slowly destroying me. But as days turned into weeks, I began to realize the quiet wasn't empty. It was space. Space for me to breathe again. I started going to the gym more, not because I wanted to get revenge or show off to Sam, but because I wanted to feel strong in my own body again. Each rep, each drop of sweat was like shedding the weight of him. Work became my anchor. I volunteered for projects I'd always been too distracted to take on. Late nights at the office no longer felt draining. They felt empowering. My boss noticed. Colleagues began complimenting my focus, my drive. Even my friends saw the change. "You look happier," one of them said during brunch. "Like you're finally yourself again." I smiled. For the first time in a long time, it wasn't forced. Meanwhile, Sam wasn't doing so well. Mutual friends whispered that things with Diana had blown up spectacularly. She cheated, humiliated him, and left him scrambling to patch together his pride. He tried to hide it at first. His social media went dark. No more smiling selfies, no more captions about real passion, just silence. But silence speaks louder than words. And then came the messages. The same man who once mocked me for being too needy suddenly couldn't stop reaching out. "Sam, I've been thinking about us. I messed up. Sam, Diana isn't who I thought she was. I see that now. Sam, Irene, please, just talk to me." I ignored every one of them. Not because I didn't see them, but because I did. And I wanted him to know I saw them and chose silence anyway. Weeks passed. His messages turned desperate. "I miss you. I can change. You're the only one who ever cared about me. Please, just one more chance." Late night calls, voicemails full of sobs. His voice cracked with guilt and desperation. The irony wasn't lost on me. The man who once rolled his eyes at my concern was now begging for the very reassurance he'd denied me. And yet all I felt was clarity. He hadn't changed. He was just lonely. I wasn't his first choice. I was his fallback, again. And this time I refused to play that role. Instead, I poured myself into the new version of my life. I started painting again, something I'd abandoned years ago when my time and energy revolved around Sam. I reconnected with an old friend, Marissa, who invited me to join a hiking group. Standing on top of a ridge, wind whipping through my hair, I felt stronger than I had in years. And one night, staring at the city lights from my balcony, I realized something profound. For so long, I'd defined myself by what I gave to someone else, by how useful, loyal, dependable I was. But now, for the first time, I was living for me. And it felt peaceful. Of course, peace didn't mean Sam gave up. Not yet. One evening, as I left the gym, I saw him standing outside waiting. His eyes were red, his hair disheveled, his body thinner than I remembered. Irene, he said, his voice hoarse, please, just hear me out. My heart didn't skip a beat. It didn't ache. It didn't do anything at all. I crossed my arms. You've been texting me for weeks. I think I've heard enough. He stepped closer, desperation radiating off him. I made a mistake. Diana. She used me. She broke me down. But you were always good to me. Please, Irene, I can change. I'll be better. Just give me one more chance. I shook my head slowly. You didn't just make a mistake, Sam. You told me to my face I'd never measure up. That doesn't get taken back. Tears welled in his eyes. His hand reached for mine. I was angry. I didn't mean it. Please, I can't lose you again. I gently pulled my hand away. My voice was steady calm. You already lost me the moment you compared me to her. You don't come back from that. And for the first time, I saw it hit him. The finality. No second chances. No more backup plan. Just the reality he'd created for himself. As I walked away, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt free. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't proving them wrong. It's living a life where they no longer matter. If you had told me a year ago that I'd be living without Sam, I would have laughed. Back then, my life revolved around him, his moods, his needs, his dreams. Now I wake up in the morning, stretch, and realize something that still feels miraculous. My life is mine again. I started saying yes to things I used to avoid. Marissa invited me to a weekend hiking trip. I went. The air smelled like pine and freedom, and for the first time in years, I wasn't worried about checking my phone for his texts. A coworker asked if I'd join her for a painting class. I signed up even though I hadn't held a brush in years. My first strokes were shaky, clumsy, but they felt alive. And then there were the small joys. Cooking for myself without worrying if he'd sneer at the food. Rearranging the apartment to my taste. Sleeping diagonally across the bed because for once I could. Each little act was a reminder I wasn't just surviving without him. I was thriving. But Sam was unraveling. Mutual friends whispered about how badly things had gone after Diana left him. He'd tried chasing her down, begging, just like he had with me. She laughed in his face. Worse words spread about how he'd been humiliated publicly, Diana showing up to a party with someone new while Sam was there watching. He left early, red-eyed and drunk, muttering under his breath. The man who once mocked me for being too needy was now the punchline of whispered jokes. I should have felt sorry for him, but all I felt was distance. Because the man crumbling in front of everyone wasn't the man I fell in love with. That man was long gone. Still, Sam didn't stop trying to claw his way back to me. Another message appeared one night. Irene. I know you probably won't answer, but please, I'm lost without you. Diana ruined me. But you always believed in me. Please don't give up on us. Reading his words, I didn't feel the sting I once would have. I felt nothing. That nothing was powerful. It was freedom. Meanwhile, life had other plans for me. One evening after work, my coworker introduced me to her brother Adrian. He was tall, soft-spoken, the kind of man who listened more than he talked. He asked me about my art, my hiking trip, my favorite books. He wasn't flashy. He didn't brag. He just saw me. For weeks, we only spoke casually. I wasn't rushing into anything I wasn't ready to. But there was something refreshing about Adrian. A calmness that didn't make me feel like I had to prove my worth every second. And for the first time, I allowed myself to imagine the possibility of love that didn't feel like a battle. Then came the night I ran into Sam again. I was at a cafe with Marissa laughing over something silly when I saw him outside on the sidewalk. His shoulders were hunched, his clothes wrinkled, his face pale. He looked nothing like the confident man I once admired. His eyes met mine through the glass. For a second, his expression lit up, desperate, hopeful. I didn't look away, but I didn't smile either. He stood there frozen, waiting for me to wave him in, to signal that he still had a place in my life. I didn't move. After a long, painful pause, he dropped his gaze and walked away. And as I watched him disappear into the crowd, I realized something. I wasn't haunted by him anymore. His downfall wasn't my revenge. His humiliation wasn't my victory. My victory was the simple fact that I could sit in that cafe, laugh with my friend, and feel absolutely nothing for the man who once defined my world. That was peace. Later that night, lying in bed, I thought about Adrian's quiet smile, about how he didn't know my whole story yet, but maybe one day I'd be ready to share it. And for the first time since Sam shattered me, I didn't feel broken anymore. I felt whole. And I realized maybe that was the real beginning. I thought I was done with Sam, truly done. But life has a way of testing us even after we think we've closed the book. It happened on a rainy Thursday night. I was leaving the office late, the streets slick with reflections of neon lights, when I heard my name. Irene. I turned and there he was, Sam. Soaked, disheveled, clutching an umbrella that he hadn't even opened. His eyes darted around like he'd been waiting hours just to catch me. I froze, not out of fear, just surprise. "Please," he said. Stepping closer, rain plastering his hair to his forehead. "Please, just give me 10 minutes. I sighed. "Sam." He raised a hand, his voice trembling. "Don't shut me out yet. I know I've lost everything. Diana's gone. My job's a mess. My friends don't even look at me the same. I have nothing left," his voice cracked. "Except you." The desperation in his eyes was raw, the kind of desperation I'd once felt when I was begging him to see me. But now the roles had reversed. I stood under the awning, rain dripping around me, and for a moment I almost pitied him. Almost. "You don't mean that, Sam," I said quietly. "You don't want me. You just don't want to be alone." His jaw tightened, panic flashing across his face. "No, that's not true. You were always the one who believed in me, the one who stayed. I can change. I'll prove it to you." I shook my head slowly. "You had your chance to prove it, and you chose to compare me to someone who never loved you. You chose to tear me down instead of lifting me up. You don't get to come back from that." "Please," he whispered, tears mixing with the rain. "I'm begging you." I stepped back. My voice was steady, stronger than I ever thought it could be. "I begged once too, Sam. Do you remember I begged you to care to choose me, to stop comparing me to her? You rolled your eyes. You called me dramatic. You laughed. And now you know what it feels like." His face crumpled anguish, twisting his features. But I felt nothing. Not hate, not love, just the quiet certainty that this chapter was closed. "I'm not coming back," I said softly. "Not now, not ever." And with that, I walked away, leaving him in the rain. That night, I sat on my couch, a blanket wrapped around me, watching the storm outside. My phone buzzed once one final message from Sam. "You'll regret this. No one will ever care about you like I did." I didn't reply. Instead, I turned my phone off, set it aside, and picked up my paintbrush. Because the truth was, I didn't regret anything. He was right about one thing: no one would ever care about me like he did. And thank God for that. Months passed, the seasons changed. I saw Sam once in passing on a street corner, head down, shoulders slumped. He didn't see me, and I didn't feel the urge to wave. By then, Adrian had gently become a part of my life. He never rushed me, never demanded I forget the past overnight. Instead, he offered quiet support, laughter, in small moments, kindness that didn't come with conditions. And for the first time, I began to believe that love didn't have to be painful. Looking back now, I don't hate Sam. Hate would mean he still mattered. What I feel instead is gratitude for the lessons, for the strength I didn't know I had, for the peace I found when I finally walked away. Because the best revenge isn't proving someone wrong. It's living a life where their name no longer lingers in your mind. Sam got what he wanted: passion, excitement, chaos. I got something better